Dear God, may the thoughts that you've put on my mind be the right words for these your people. Thomas Trober was a Presbyterian pastor and a gifted preacher. And he tells this story of an experience he once had. One day several years ago, I was in a department store buying myself a new shirt when a complete stranger walked up to me and said, "You must be Henry Trover's son." I looked at the person and I said, "I don't believe I've ever seen you." He said, "Oh no, you've never seen me at all. But a long time ago, I worked with your father. I was a close colleague of his, and when I saw you across the aisle of the store, I said to myself, I'd know that face anywhere. You are the very image of your father." For several weeks after that, Trover would sometimes be going down the street and maybe come around the corner and catch his reflection in a store window. He started to see himself with the eyes of someone else. It wasn't like looking into a mirror in the morning. When he would come around the corner and catch that reflection, he would think, "That's Henry Trover." All of a sudden, he would be seeing how he bore the image of his father. And so it is with us. Each one of us is created with the image of God indelibly imprinted on our souls, so that in some miraculous and inexplicable way, the diverse expressions of God that are in you, and you, and you, and me, all come together to illustrate the mystery, to live together in community as we each do our best to display for the world all the possibilities that the divine imprint of God's image has on us. So many of us get to look in the mirror, and we see that reflection that stares back at us. For some, we may look like our parents. That's part of the family legacy we all carry with us. We're usually similar to, or may be the spitting image of one of our parents. That's my case. Sometimes when I look in the mirror, I see my father staring back at me. It's a frightening thought, because as I look at our lives, sometimes I see my father's actions going on in my own life. But that's what James is writing about in his epistle. James is writing about not the reflective device we use today, but about ancient mirrors that were made of polished metal. And the surface gave a distorted image. Now, mirrors are mentioned twice in the New Testament. The first time in 1 Corinthians chapter 13, 12a, Paul writes, "For now we see in a mirror dimly." In that passage, the footnote indicates that the image in the mirror can be understood as a riddle that is not very clear at all. However, the footnotes in our epistle this morning indicate that the mirror James is talking about reflects an image of the believer's face of their birth. He wants his readers to look deeply into the mirror, to see beyond that reflection into their souls. But James's story doesn't really start off well. He eventually will become the elder brother to Jesus. But he doesn't start out as that. His story is like the parable of the prodigal son in Luke 15. A son who only returns to his father after striking out and living on his own. Now it had to all change. James looked in the mirror one day and didn't like what he saw. So when the resurrected Jesus showed up and said, "I need you, brother," James stepped up and became a doer. If you asked him, he probably couldn't have told you why he became a doer. He just did. He just did what he always did. He became the helpful one, the calm one, the good one, the pure one. But now there was something new inside of him, something that took root, some word that made sense, some word that made his life different. The Pharisees in our gospel reading are lawyers who spend most of their time interpreting the law. Seems like a logical thing for lawyers to do, doesn't it? They had taken the position that you always wash your hands before eating to purify yourself and keep what you are eating undefiled. They are determined as they approach Jesus to show him how much they know about the law. And they wonder why he and his disciples are not following those laws. They were looking in the mirror. They liked what they saw, and that led them to their pious adherence to the rules. Now, Jesus is quick to remind them that the laws they are so fond of were established by humans. They were not the law of Moses, which God sent down. And he quotes Isaiah chapter 29, verse 13. The Lord said, "Because these people draw near with their mouths and honor me with their lips, while their hearts are far from me, and their worship of me is a human commandment learned on earth." Jesus accuses them of putting that image of power, of piety, before their true obedience to the words of God. So the Pharisees looked in the mirror and they liked what they saw. They weren't really interested in looking any deeper to see what might need changing in their lives. Like James, who did look deeper and became a doer and a servant, a pure, good, faithful servant. He became that pure, good, faithful servant, a doer for Jesus because of the words that took root in him. He looked in the mirror. Perhaps he didn't like what he saw, because what he saw was emptiness. What he saw was a void where his motivation in his soul ought to be. But when he looked into those eyes, the eyes he knew from his own birth, the eyes that managed to love him even when he didn't want them to, those eyes seemed to call for more, and now seemed to give more. When he looked into Jesus' eyes, it was as if something took root in him. Something was planted, a reason, a purpose, a new beginning, a new soul. And all that he did because of those implanted words, that hope revived, that soul restored. It was the power to save a soul. And that's what he wrote. Not the works, the root of the word implanted. The works grew out of salvation. You didn't need to earn it. James needed the word to be implanted. Now, history affords us many examples of saints at every age that gave their lives over to an image of themselves far beyond they had ever seen before. And from this day forward, we never forget what they look like in the eyes of God. Taking St. Ignatius of Loyola for it as an example. He didn't begin his life as a religious person. To the contrary, he was caught up in images of medieval chivalry. His fantasies were those of gallantry and kingly romance. He became a professional soldier, good at gambling, fighting, and having affairs with women. While defending a fortress in 1521, an artillery shot crashed between his legs, shattering his right leg and wounding his left. As he lay ill and deformed in his family castle, Ignatius was told by the village surgeons that the stewed bones of his right leg would have to be broken and reset, and they didn't have any anesthetic. 30 years later, he would still describe that agony as butchery. While lying about, suffering further painful treatments that failed to help his brutalized leg, he sought books of medieval chivalry to read. But he couldn't find any books like that in his house. The only books that were available were a 4-volume Life of Jesus Christ, Vita Jesu Christi, and a kind of dictionary of saints. To combat his boredom as he recovered, he read those books. He possessed no thoughts then of either piety or religion. In his later biography, Ignatius wrote that as he read the books over many times, he became rather fond of what he found in them. He began to acquire a vision of himself far beyond what he had previously held. He began to see himself as capable of living a life similar to St. Francis or St. Dominic. This new view of himself, having come from looking into the mirror of God, goaded his mediocrity and highlighted a going forward into becoming a completely different kind of person. Ignatius never really forgot what he looked like from that day forward. He advanced from good to better and founded the Society of Jesus. At age 50, he was elected the first superior general of that society, thus becoming the true father of the Jesuits, who had given so much to our Christian heritage. Certainly, Ignatius' view of himself at age 50 was far different from the man that he had fantasized about being when he was a royal page or competent military commander in his younger years. He had seen a higher image of himself. So the next time you look in the mirror, remember the reflection that you see there is that of a person who was made in the image of God. Let that image show forth for everyone to meet, so that they might see in you a new light and encouragement, bringing changes to their lives as they look at their images. When we encounter others in the world, may our actions and our words show everyone that we have not forgotten the image we saw in the mirror. Always remember, we look like God. So we have to